There's a certain type of person. They walk into a room and before anyone has a chance to say a word, they already know. The couple in the corner who stopped talking just before the door opened. The coworker whose smile is just a little too wide today. The silence that fell 2 seconds early. Most people walk right past all of this, but this person doesn't. It's not that they choose to notice it, it just happens, automatically, instantly, without permission. People call it a gift, a superpower, incredible emotional intelligence. But if you live with it, you know the truth. It's exhausting. And today we'll explore why some people are wired this way, how it affects them by looking at 7 specific signs. And finally, we'll discuss how to live with this awareness without being destroyed by it. Before we move on to the signs, we need to understand where all of this comes from. After all, it doesn't just happen by chance. Empirical psychology divides the causes into 2 distinct groups. The first group consists of people who are born this way. Science refers to them as highly sensitive people, or HSPs. People who possess a trait called sensory sensitivity, first studied by psychologist Elaine Aron. Their nervous system processes every bit of incoming information more deeply than average. Not more emotionally, but more thoroughly. Every detail is filtered, compared, and retained in memory longer. For them, the world always unfolds in higher resolution than for others. The second group wasn't like this from the start. For them, this awareness is not a character trait, it is a scar. Neurobiology calls this hypervigilance, a state of chronic nervous system activation that develops in environments where safety was unpredictable. Imagine a child growing up in a home where moods could shift without warning. That child could not afford to be innocent. He had to become a radar station. He memorized the sound of a key in the lock to figure out which version of a person was about to walk into the room. They learned to read the pauses in conversation before they escalated into an argument. They knew exactly when to disappear and when to smile. From a neurological standpoint, their amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, was in a state of near constant activation. Chronic stress in early childhood causes measurable structural changes in the amygdala and prefrontal cortex. Changes that persist into adulthood, even when the initial danger has long passed. The brain has learned one lesson. This world is unpredictable. Keep scanning. Be ready. No one taught them this. Their nervous system formed this response automatically. And over time, this survival mechanism becomes so deeply ingrained that it is perceived as part of their personality. As adults, they often look at themselves and wonder, why do I overthink everything? Why can't I just relax? But they aren't broken. They possess an intellect tempered by survival. The shield that once protected them has become part of their skin. 1. Living in a state of constant analysis. This is the most obvious sign, and the one that drains the most energy. For the average person, a conversation is just a conversation. For them, the mind is always performing hidden calculations beneath everything happening on the surface. Here's a real-life example. Their manager sends a message at 4 p.m. Can you stop by later for a quick chat? For most people, this is a meeting. For them, the moment they read it, a wave of tension washes over them. They replay the wording in their minds. Quick chat, not meeting. Why did she use that specific word? Did she have a different tone during our last call? Did I miss something in last week's report? They don't just hear the words. They notice the 3-second pause before someone pays them a compliment. They pick up on a subtle shift in a person's posture when a certain name is mentioned. This is partly explained by the activity of the default mode network, a brain system associated with self-referential thinking, reflection, and social cognition. Research from Harvard Medical School has shown that in people with heightened sensitivity to threats, the default mode network tends to remain more active, even while performing tasks that require external concentration. The result? Half of them are present in the here and now. nodding, responding, participating in what's happening in the room. The other half is somewhere else entirely, taking notes, tracking inconsistencies, running simulations. Their brains have just run a silent marathon while their bodies sat motionless. And they wonder why they're so exhausted at the end of the day when seemingly nothing special happened. 2. Hyper self-awareness that never switches off. The analysis doesn't only point outward. At some point, it turns the camera inward. In psychology, this is called metacognition, the ability to observe your own thinking. Everyone has this ability. For them, it never turns off. They don't just feel an emotion, they monitor it. The sequence runs like this. An emotion appears, they immediately analyze it, then they judge it. They're walking outside and feel a sudden sadness. Instead of simply letting themselves feel sad, they immediately cross their arms. Why am I sad? Does this sadness even make sense? I have a good life. Why do I feel empty? Something must be wrong with me. Even joy gets dissected. They're at a dinner with friends, they laugh at something, and the very next second part of their mind is watching from the ceiling. Did that sound too loud? Was that laugh a little forced? Did anyone notice? It's like trying to dance while simultaneously watching yourself in a mirror and correcting your posture. You might not miss a single step, but you lose the flow entirely. A 2022 study in the Journal of Affective Disorders found that elevated metacognitive monitoring is significantly associated with rumination, emotional exhaustion, and reduced capacity for spontaneous positive experience. Their awareness deepens. Their natural presence quietly disappears. 3. You lose the ability to simply trust. Deep awareness has a cost that nobody warns you about. At a certain point, you start to see the backstage of human behavior. Psychology calls this high mentalizing ability, a sophisticated form of theory of mind, the capacity to model other people's intentions, emotions, and hidden motives. For most people, this is a skill. For them, it's on all the time. A coworker brings them coffee and compliments their work. Instead of simply receiving it, their brain immediately scans. What is this person building toward? What do they need from me? Is this real? Or is it positioning? They realize that kindness sometimes has conditions. That affection can be a calculated investment. That the confidence someone projects is sometimes just a curtain hiding the fear underneath. This creates a quiet loss, not the loss of childhood innocence, the loss of relational innocence. The ability to receive something at face value is no longer fully available. A compliment always seems to carry layers. An apology never feels quite complete. A promise always sounds slightly fragile. They don't become cynical or bitter. They become careful, extraordinarily careful. And sometimes they feel deeply alone in a crowd, because no one else seems to be seeing the same layer of things they're seeing. 4. Empathy that cannot be switched off. For most people, empathy is something they choose to activate. A friend is crying, they turn it on. The conversation ends, they turn it off. For them, there is no switch. They walk into a meeting room, nobody says anything. But they can feel the weight of friction between two people who haven't spoken about it yet. Psychology distinguishes between cognitive empathy, understanding how someone feels, and affective empathy, actually experiencing it yourself. Research on mirror neuron systems suggests that in highly sensitive individuals, the boundary between observation and absorption is significantly thinner. They don't just understand another person's pain, they live inside it for a while. Someone on the bus taps their foot with anxious energy. Their own heartbeat shifts. A friend describes a difficult conversation they had, and hours after the friend has moved on, that conversation is still sitting somewhere in their chest. The result is that they become the emotional regulator in every room they enter. They soften their voice instinctively. They choose words that don't detonate. They absorb tension so others don't have to. People feel safe around them. People seek them out. But the price is invisible. They become a container for everyone else's emotional weight. And at the end of the day, very few people think to ask how they are. 5. When the body becomes the alarm system. Awareness doesn't stay in the mind, it moves into the body. Neuroscience calls this interoception, the brain's ability to monitor internal physical states, processed primarily through the insular cortex. A 2020 paper in the journal Neuroimage found that individuals with hypervigilant nervous systems show significantly elevated insular cortex activity, meaning their brain is constantly receiving and amplifying signals from the body. They drink a coffee. Their heart beats slightly faster. For most people, that's just caffeine. For their nervous system, the brain detects the elevated heart rate, searches its threat database, and raises an alert. Elevated heartbeat, possible danger, prepare. Normal physical sensations become exaggerated warning signals. This creates a closed anxiety loop. A physical sensation appears. The brain misreads it as threat. The body releases cortisol. Cortisol creates stronger physical sensations. The brain detects those sensations, and the loop tightens. They feel restless at baseline. They feel uneasy on quiet evenings when nothing is wrong, because their body has been trained to treat stillness with suspicion. 6. The need to predict everything. When the body and mind are both running constant threat detection, the psyche begins searching for a way to restore a sense of control. And it finds one. If I can predict everything, I can prevent the pain. This is not a conscious decision. It's a coping strategy built in the dark. They believe at some deep, wordless level that if they can model every possible outcome, they won't be caught off guard by disappointment. Understanding becomes armor. Their mind begins running simulations continuously. What if this person pulls away next week? What if what I'm building right now disappears? If the worst happens, exactly how should I respond so I don't fall apart? Clinical psychology calls this anticipatory anxiety, and a 2023 meta-analysis in Clinical Psychology Review found it is one of the strongest predictors of chronic psychological exhaustion in high-sensitivity individuals. The cruel irony. In trying to stay ahead of pain, they step outside their own life. Instead of living in the present, they are managing it like a high-risk project. Every relationship gets risk assessed. Every decision gets run through 10 scenarios. Every good moment gets held at arm's length because somewhere in the background, the mind is already preparing for when it ends. Protection replaces presence, and they become exhausted from guarding against futures that haven't happened yet. 7. Feeling most alone when surrounded by people. This is the sign that most people carry the longest without ever naming it. They are at a dinner. People are laughing. The conversation is moving. And they are there, fully present on the outside. But inside, something is quiet and distant. Not because they don't care about the people around them, because they are seeing too much at once. They notice who isn't really listening. They feel the loneliness inside someone who is performing happiness. They sense the thing that isn't being said underneath the thing that is, and they can't turn it off. So they sit inside a room full of people, understanding everyone, and feeling understood by no one. Psychologists studying social sensitivity describe this as the empathy paradox, the phenomenon where the more accurately someone perceives the emotional states of others, the more acutely they feel the absence of that same perception being directed back toward them. They give depth. They rarely receive it. They are the person everyone comes to, and often the last person anyone thinks to check on. A 2019 study in Personality and Individual Differences found that individuals high in sensory processing sensitivity report significantly greater feelings of social loneliness despite having equivalent or larger social networks than less sensitive individuals. It is not about how many people are around them. It is about the quality of being seen. And for them, being truly seen is rare enough that when it happens, they remember it for years. The 3 principles. They cannot simply turn off the awareness. Asking them to notice less is like asking someone with perfect vision to blur their own eyesight. The solution is not to become less aware. The solution is to stop carrying everything they notice. People who learn to live well inside this kind of sensitivity tend to anchor themselves in 3 principles. The first principle: not every signal requires a response. If someone replies slowly to a message, they might just be tired. If a coworker walks past without smiling, they might have a headache. The awareness will still fire. The choice is whether to follow it. They learn to notice without investigating, to register something without turning it into a project. The second principle: not every internal state requires analysis. Anxiety appears. Instead of immediately asking, "Why am I anxious? What does this mean? What am I missing?" they learn to simply say, "My body is activated right now." That's a physical state. I don't have to build a story around it. They observe without judgment. They let it pass without dissection. This is not suppression. It is the difference between watching a cloud move through the sky and deciding you need to understand exactly where it came from. The third principle: not every truth needs to be acted on. They may see someone's insecurity clearly. They don't have to become that person's therapist. They may sense instability in a relationship. Sometimes the clearest response is simply to step back. They begin to understand that awareness is only a gift when it comes with boundaries. Knowing what is theirs to carry and what belongs to the world to handle without them. When they learn to practice these 3 things, something quiet begins to shift. The awareness doesn't disappear, it softens. They still feel the weight of a room the moment they walk in, but they are no longer pulled into its current. They still see the layers underneath what people say, but they stop needing to excavate everyone. They move from using awareness to predict to using it to be present, from fear to curiosity, from carrying everything to choosing what deserves their attention. Their life becomes lighter. Not because the world becomes simpler, not because people become less complicated. The world is still full of contradictions. People are still full of hidden things. Life becomes lighter because they stop trying to hold every equation at once. They can't turn off the light in their mind, but they learn to change its quality, from a laser that exposes every flaw in the room to a candle, bright enough to see clearly, warm enough to finally rest. If you recognized yourself in any of these 7 signs, leave a comment with the number that hit the hardest. Not for the algorithm, because somewhere in the comments right now is someone who feels exactly what you feel and has never had a word for it. Subscribe. This channel explores the hidden psychology of people who think deeply, feel deeply, and carry more than anyone around them knows.